As a 11, 12-year-old, I would listen to music in bed at night. Like, it's kind of embarrassing to admit, but like Enya, stuff like that. That's just sort of new agey music, drone music that lifted me out of my body.
How do you think psychedelics can inform, what people believe is at the bedrock of reality? Because one, I don't know how consistent a stream it is, but certainly in people that I've spoken to that believe in idealist consciousness philosophies, they have usually had a pretty resonant psychedelic trip where they have felt firsthand this universal consciousness and they think they've experienced it themselves, and that has really informed their views throughout their career on this. Is this the case for you?
Yeah, I think before psychedelics, it was more uh, initially like meditation and some sort of just spontaneous mystical experiences. Well, not entirely spontaneous. I mean, as a 11, 12-year-old, I would listen to music in bed at night. Like, it's kind of embarrassing to admit, but like Enya, stuff like that. That's just sort of new agey music, drone music that lifted me out of my body. And I realized that, there's this whole world out there that we see with our eyes, and you close your eyes and there's an inner journey you can go on. And that inner realm of whatever you want to call it, the imaginal world, um, is seemingly infinite. And so very early on, before I even knew what a psychedelic was, had been exploring consciousness in that way and found it quite compelling. Um, and so later on, when I did try psychedelics for the first time, it was a kind of revelation uh, and a confirmation of what I had experienced just listening to music, which as William James put it over a century ago, that until we've really taken account of these inner realms of consciousness, we can't claim to have a finished picture of reality or of the universe. Um, just in terms of what can be externally measured, right? There's something else. There's another uh, domain here that is worthy of scientific investigation and that hasn't, at least in the West, in the modern West, really been looked at. Um,
Right.
and so what psychedelics do is not just, leave you with new ideas about the world, but they transform your perception. Like I was saying earlier, in the way that philosophy, when it's done well, speculative philosophy in particular, is psychedelic in the sense that it's altering your perception. It's not just new ways of thinking about the world. You actually perceive the world differently. Um, yeah, there's definitely there's no question that there's a before and after with psychedelics, where
Right.
people, they've traditionally been called hallucinogens, um, because they produce hallucinations, which is to say you see things that aren't really there. But most people, when they've had the experience for themselves, would report, what James would call a noetic experience, which is that this was an experience that felt realer than anything else you'd ever experienced. It was more real than real. And, and so there's a kind of revelatory quality to it where it's not that your mind has invented things that aren't really there, like you're seeing pink elephants or whatever. It's like you feel as though you're noticing something about the nature of your everyday ordinary experience that was right under your nose and you hadn't attended to it. And then
Right.
and then all of a sudden you see it and it's obvious and it changes everything. And I've had the experience where that obvious thing that gets revealed is very easily forgotten when you come down, and then you take mushrooms again and you're just like, oh yeah, there it is again. How
Yeah.
did I forget this? And
Yeah.
what is this? It's something about the non-dual relationality of reality, I think. the
Right.
subject-object relationship that is very easy to forget, because when in our normal ordinary state, the object is over there and the subject is over here, and that boundary seems fixed, but it turns out that it's not.
Right. Yeah, I struggle to know during a trip what is a deeper truth or a hallucination, because I can have all of these deep realizations about my life. And, sort of one of the consistent themes that happens for me is that, like, all of the societal bullshit just kind of dissolves. All these social comparisons, all of these, well, my friend is doing this and I'm, making way less money than him. Like, God, that's like, all of those rat racy capitalist societal stuff just goes away. I want to be in nature. I have, extreme gratitude for my parents, my family, my friends, all of that. And it does feel more real. And then I kind of look over to the side and my clothes look like an octopus. And I'm like, oh, so it's like you have all these really deep realizations, but then, clearly there is a hallucination aspect where you are seeing things that, because like there wasn't actually, the branches of this tree were not actually violently shaking or dancing or jiving like they look like they are in this moment. So it's like, it's very hard for me to know what's true and what's not, when clearly it is warping every part of your perceptual system, your thoughts. The way of thinking is completely altered, warped, shifted. So I find it interesting when some people have that experience. And, I've talked to, legendary consciousness researcher Christoph Koch, who like had this completely changing, ayahuasca experience, and it shifted his perspective on like 40 years of what he thought consciousness was, which I find so fascinating, because like that almost seems ascientific to me a little bit, to trust your own experience, which sounds weird because like neuroscience kind of teaches you not to trust your own experience. It is a hallucinated prediction of the world that your brain is doing at all times.
What science can't tell us is, okay, so how should we interact with the rest of the community of life on this planet? What is our role here as human beings? And I think if you adopt the panpsychist view, not just as a theory, but you think that there really is consciousness in everything, some sort of experience, some sort of subjective horizon that is something there's like to be a tree, and that the flow of a river is the expression of some kind of an aim, even if it's diffuse, and inchoate. That agency and subjectivity are not just the private property of human beings, but pervasive. I think it allows us to make a different kind of use of our scientific knowledge and our technological power that might be more conducive to the survival of our species beyond the next century. And so it's a question of worldview and the ethos that follows from taking a view like this seriously. I think there are plenty of like really reductionistic materialists that love the natural world and care for, well, their own families and care for animals and have beautiful gardens. And so, I'm not trying to say that one's metaphysics automatically translates into being a better person or being more ecologically attuned or anything. But I think in large part, our civilization has a more or less materialist worldview, and that's not unrelated to the ecological disaster that we're faced with.
Yeah, yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I think one of the pragmatic and highly useful takeaways from panpsychism is, in ascribing consciousness to everything, is just giving everything a bit more consideration. And I couldn't agree with that more. I am I don't necessarily believe in it, but I think that takeaway is
Yeah.
incredibly useful regardless.
And the goal would be, I think, here not just to have it be a belief, but that it would be rooted in experience, and that we would feel, not that we have some way of objectively measuring how conscious this or that is, but that we can subjectively attune to the world in such a way that we have a sense of personal confirmation. Just like when we're communicating with another human being, sometimes we know when we're being heard, and sometimes we know when we're not being heard, we're not being understood. There's not a sense of empathic resonance occurring. We know the difference between when we're connecting with someone and when we're not.
Yes.
Maybe the same thing is possible with, the non-human world. Um, Most people have like, pets. We can obviously communicate with dogs. There's very clearly inner emotional states, and when your dog's feeling shame and when it's excited and happy. Maybe we can extend that further, um, and cultivate uh, those sorts of modes of experiential attunement, and so that it's not just, oh, I believe in panpsychism, but no, I feel like that there was some kind of a felt experiential transmission between me and that tree, and that's not just a projection.
Right. No, I totally get it. Like the and it is something that anytime I try and do psychedelics, I feel such an attractive force to trees. I mean, tree hugging comes from a place, right? But I literally find myself hanging out of trees and just absolutely loving trees. Such a strange experience. And it is something that I wish I could carry over more into my, sober states. That love and that magnetic love that I have for the earth. I've done acid trips where I watch Animal Planet for like 7 hours and then donate €500 to the red pandas, and it's just like that will happen frequently enough, and like I wish that carried over more, and I think maybe it does. Some of it, I think, I surely some of it oozes over, but and I do think it feels so good to be in that state. So it's almost like I would prefer that whatever philosophically inclined way I would be, I would almost prefer to be that way because I love how that feels. And as I said, I really agree with the takeaway of ascribing consciousness to everything and giving it more consideration of your care. I am, and I would agree that I think if more people thought that way, we would take better care of the Amazon rainforest, and we would care more that to get our palm oils, we need to destroy, acres and acres of land that other organisms inhabit. And, I do constantly think about if everyone just took a day off and did mushrooms, how would the world be a different place? I think that's a seriously interesting thought experiment of just every single, obviously of age, person did mushrooms. Not everyone, of course, not everyone's going to have the same effect, but like, how would the world be a different place in the months to years to follow?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, uh, uh, I wonder that too, but I also would caution just that, one of my teachers, Stan Groff, uh, who was a Czech psychiatrist and psychedelic researcher, he says psychedelics are non-specific amplifiers. Um,
Right.
and I don't think all psychedelics are the same either. I mean, mushrooms are different from LSD, or is different from 5-MeO, is different from ayahuasca, MDMA. I mean, there's so many different types of experiences and channels that one can tune into, and some of these substances are often done in ceremonial contexts, which set and setting, right? It changes everything.
Yes.
And
Without
so
a doubt.
I used to think, when I was first reading about the 1960s counterculture and psychedelic activists and everything, that, oh, if only we could get some LSD into the water supply in Washington D.C., like we could bring about world peace overnight. And now I'm not so sure about that. I think there's a way in which the context, the set, and the setting matter almost as much as the substance themselves.
The Giant Shoulder mission is to explore radical ideas in biology, neuroscience, and consciousness, and elevate those stories to the highest possible level while keeping them accessible to everyone. If this interests you and you want to support independent science, then please consider subscribing to the Clips channel